two things helped me in preparing to work with survivor testimony. One is I began writing about Holocaust literature because when I did that, I felt that history was inadequate to give us a complex picture of individual experience during the Holocaust. I felt literature could do that, fiction could do that, drama could do that, poetry could do that. My first book was called The Holocaust and the Literary Imagination. Subsequently, I learned that literature had its limitations too when I began watching survivor testimony. If you really want to study the Holocaust, you have to be totally familiar with the history. You have to acknowledge the importance of literature, which people in literature can do, but people in history seem to have difficulty doing. I mean, more people in literature are willing to read Holocaust history than people in Holocaust history are willing to read Holocaust literature. It's more important for us to understand from the testimony what it's like for a person to have gone through genocide or to witness the genocide of other people than it is to piece together the facts of the Holocaust from the testimony. That's the job of the historian. And in fact, I learned very quickly, this is a strange thing to say, I know much more about the Holocaust than any particular survivor that I've interviewed. I'm not boasting. All I'm saying is that they know their experience. I've interviewed people who were in hiding in the forest during the war who told me they didn't know the Jews had been exterminated until the war ended because they had no access to the news. Okay? So they know their own story. It's a mistake to use testimony to write the history of the Holocaust, but it's also a mistake to ignore testimony while you're writing the history of the Holocaust. Now that I've spent so many years studying the testimony, I realize you have to patiently spend time listening to testimony too, which I do regularly. And I'm always discovering something new. There are certain camps for which there's no recorded history. All we have is the testimony. Camps which lasted for a year or two and then were shut down by the Germans, and there are no documents, no one wrote about it. The only information we have is from the survivors who were there. So if you want an overall picture, you have to do all three. But study of Holocaust literature made me aware of the importance of individual experience as against the general historical context. You can't study the Holocaust without reading Primo Levi's memoirs, for example. They are central. Or Charlotte Delbau's trilogy about her experience in Auschwitz. It became obvious to me that when you're doing an interview with a Holocaust survivor, the more they realize that you know what they're talking about, the more they are willing to talk about it. And the more they realize you don't recognize any of the names they're saying, the less enthusiastic they are to tell their story. There's a direct relationship, I think, between how much the interviewer is aware of what the survivor is talking about and what the survivor is willing to tell. There's nothing magical about me. There's a way of listening and a way of hearing beyond listening. And I think I've developed the ability to listen and to hear. And not only to be sympathetic, but to be conscious of what's going on while they're talking. And they need an audience who is willing to listen and willing to hear without interrupting and respond with sympathy and awareness and understanding. Because a lot of them say there's a myth that survivors were unable to talk about their experiences until way after the war. But that's a myth. The truth is that most of them wanted to talk about nothing else when they came to this country, and that people were unwilling to hear them.